Old allies facing a new danger. The downing of the Russian jet topped the agenda when the US president welcomed his French counterpart.
Please be seated. Turkey, like every country, has a right to defend its territory and its airspace. I think it's very important right now for us to make sure that both the Russians and the Turks are talking to each other, find out exactly what happened, and take measures to discourage any kind of escalation. The challenge has been Russia's focus on propping up Assad rather than focusing on ISIL.
The French are part of a US-led coalition. The Russians lead one of their own. France has been attempting to build a global alliance.
C'est vrai que le 11 septembre, tous les Français étaient américains.
It is true that after 9/11 the French helped Americans, and after the 13th of November the Americans helped the French. Our two people together merged as one, sharing the same emotion and determination to fight for our values. We share determination to fight terrorism everywhere and anywhere. We also want to tell the world that we will not allow those who want to destroy what we have built to do so.
America shares intelligence with France, facilitating airstrikes. It won't do that with Russia. They differ on the role of Syria's president. President Obama branded ISIS barbaric. He said the threat it posed couldn't be tolerated, and he called on the EU to implement a programme for sharing airline passenger information in a bid to thwart the movement of terrorists. The United States needs no persuasion about the scale and urgency of the threat. The State Department has issued an almost unprecedented global travel alert. They're conducting active shooter drills on the subway, beefing up security at airports and train stations. With millions on the move for Thanksgiving, America is on its guard. David Blevins, Sky News, Washington.
So what could the consequences of this altercation be? Olivia Gita is an international security and geopolitical risk consultant who has advised NATO in the past. Lilit Gevorgian is an analyst specialising in Russia and Europe at IHS Global Insight. Good evening to you both. What are the implications of this, Olivier?
Hopefully there are not going to be many, and that the de-escalation will happen because Russia will realise that most probably their fighter jets was in Turkey. It was asked to stand down, and it didn't.
And Russia doesn't like admitting it's wrong, does it?
Exactly, it doesn't. But you know, the U.S. intel is saying that 21 times the Turkish had asked the Russian to stand down. So hopefully this will de-escalate, and hopefully this will lead to much more coordination in the way that the modus operandi works between Russia and Israel when it comes to Syria. Israel has bombed 5 times targets inside Syria without having major problems because they coordinate, quote unquote, with the Russians. That should be the modus operandi if they have the same enemy.
Lilit Gevorgian, do you think this could lead to greater cooperation?
Well, in terms of the military strategy, this is one example that everyone has been highlighting, that yes, indeed, there has to be cooperation, otherwise incidents like this are likely to happen.
But Russia has said tonight it's called off any military contact with Turkey.
Well, I agree with your guest that I think in time there will be a realization that if the campaign to continue, they really have to coordinate this. Of course, there is also the realization, both on behalf of Russia and Turkey, that their neighbors who are tied not only with a current crisis, but also by economic ties, that there are quite important trade partners. So some sort of dialogue has to return. But I have to emphasize that the timing of this incident couldn't be worse, because it comes in the wake of the Russian airplane bombing, which it really had massive repercussions for the president himself, because some members of the public could actually question why Russia is in Syria. So it's quite sensitive, and Russian involvement now in Syria is justified by fighting ISIS, by fighting those who carry on attacks both in Russia and in Syria.
But we've heard from NATO again tonight that the majority of the Russian attacks have been in parts of Syria where Islamic State isn't present.
But that is denied by Russia. So a common strategy is about identifying who they are going to attack, how they are going to attack, and how to carry out these attacks to make sure that the incidents like today doesn't happen.
What about that relationship that NATO has as well? How does NATO respond? I mean, we've had some statements this evening already, haven't we, Olivier Guiter?
Yeah, look, NATO needs to play a moderate part in this, because a lot of the NATO members, including France, which incidentally President Hollande is going to meet President Putin in Moscow to talk about fighting against Islamic State in Syria.
Around the table,
right, to have a coalition. This is also the worst time possible to have such an incident while they're trying to get together, and Putin had said that he would put all his navy and military to help the French in their campaign. So everybody has an interest to get this under wraps, to forget about it and move on.
You talked about the economic implications as well. What about that economic relationship between Russia and Turkey and how that could be affected, Lilith?
The tensions over Syria and the disagreements between Russia and Turkey have already taken toll on economic relations. I have to say that in recent months we've heard to the Turkey escalating tensions, suggesting that there could be some sanctions even against Russia. Now, I have to say that from the fallout between Russia and the West over Ukraine, which involved economic sanctions, Turkey actually benefited, because the Turkish exports, particularly fresh vegetables and fruits, they actually benefited because they took the market share that the European suppliers had lost in Russia. So, and there has been also emphasis on more increased energy cooperation. Russia is financing and constructing a nuclear power station in Turkey. Russia is supplying over 50%, up to 60% of the natural gas that is consumed in Turkey. So in terms of the trade relationship, these two countries are very, very important for each other. But we have already seen that, for example, Turks have said that they may stop importing gas, which could be actually quite damaging for Turks rather than Russians at the moment because of the contractual obligations. There had been more strict inspections imposed on Turkish exporters of fruits and vegetables. Those trucks that carry Turkish exports to Central Asia via Russia, they have encountered problems. So this translates into poor exports for already troubled Turkish economy, and of course the Russian economy, which is in recession.
Okay, Lilith Kevorkian and Olivier Guiter, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.